Whether that's political, economic, religious, wrong view, wrong understanding can cause unlimited suffering. And what's the most brilliant thing in the human realm? A good idea. A right idea can lead people towards the truth and all kinds of benefits. So we're going to look at a few different ideas and see where they're at. 3 different chakra systems that are available to us today. And of course, there's a vast amount of literature available. There's so much material that I decided this should be a book, not just a presentation. So I'm going to, over the next 30 to 40 minutes, I'm just going to breeze through the high points. So there's a lot of literature available, a lot of resources on the origins of Tantra and what that all means. But we're just going to cut to the chase and give you a few key points. And some of the best scholars have compiled lists of what it would mean, what characterizes Tantra. And in this 26-point list, I picked out a few that are, for me, the most important. In fact, one of them is not even on the list. So Tantra has to do with the subtle body, it must do with the subtle body, and specifically the chakras, and also the 5 elements, which is not even on this list. Paramount, central to Tantra, whether it's Hindu or Buddhist, is the 5 elements. And enlightenment must happen within the body. This is not just a mind technique, it's a biological transformation that's going to take place. And I'm not going to go through all these points, but Tantra developed as a dynamic tension that still exists today, as explained so beautifully by Jeffrey Samuel in his book, Civilized Shamans. This tension between the monastic, institutional, kind of dogmatic, and the wild yogis, meditators in the caves that are having direct interaction with source material. So that's a dynamic tension that still prevails and caused a lot of problems in the past as well. So you can again find these wonderful resources. This is probably, supposedly this first one, Scholastic book, is the first book ever, first Scholastic text describing the subtle body within different cultures on a global scale, the first scientific intrusion into that area. We have a traditional translation there, the secret map of the body, quite beautiful, of the energy structure of the body. We have Ian Baker's exposition, and of course we have New Age stuff. Subtle body, we'll just say a couple things about this context, is that the energy body is a hierarchy. There's not just one energy, prana or chi or something. There's many different hierarchies of energies. Look at Gurdjieff's work of hydrogens. It gives you this kind of idea. And the important thing is it's structured. It's well-defined. This is just like anything else in nature. There's a very, very complex and very accurate structure of how our energy works. And here's the first secret that I'm going to give you. The subtle body is not something spiritual. It's part of our biological anatomy. You cannot function without an energetic body, photons, the premovascular system, and so on. This is not a spiritual system unless you make it one. It's a big secret. And it's an error that people make. Oh yes, my aura and so on, it's spiritual. No, it's not. That's just life. Dogs have it. Insects have an energetic field as well. So it's a focus of bioenergetic medical systems, whether that's homeopathy, Ayurveda, Tibetan medicine, and so on. And it can be the focus of spiritual systems if you wish. It's just a potential. And so here we have our classic picture, probably most people know, 72,000 different centers, and then we have right and left, the main channels, right and left, and the central channel. And, so we have these well-known channels, and again, these are normal functions within your body. You don't have to be anything special, everyone has them. But the important point here is the knots, in Sanskrit called the granthi, in Tibetan, tsik, which is interesting, because the tsik does not mean a knot. It just means a connector. And in fact, this idea that you have to untie the knots, yes, you untie the knots when you die, and probably during deep sleep, dreamless sleep, that you enter the central channel. But you're not supposed to enter the central channel while you're living. So these connectors, or actually these granthi, are actually there to keep you alive. Because samsara means you're functioning normally in the right and left channels and all the other channels. The central channel is the second number 2, is the source. It's bringing you elemental forces, it's bringing you dynamic powers, karma, all kinds of things like that. But you don't live in the central channel. You don't want to go there unless you're very serious about dying while alive, which is called Tantra. And it's interesting that in the Shaivite system, we have 3 main granthi or knots, and the Tibetan system, they talk about that in each of the different chakras. So you could enter the central channel from each of those points, but you don't want to do it while you're lecturing properly. So another context that's extremely important is the 5 elements, which is what I spend a lot of my time thinking about and working with. And so these are intelligent, they're not just mechanisms, they're intelligent formative forces and patterns of being. They arise as primary agents, like from pure consciousness, we get the 5 elements. And they're not perceptible or tangible in their pure form in our world. They can be invoked, they can be evoked, you can work with them through sound, color, seed syllables, and so on and so forth. But you won't find them lying around. We're in the world where the 5 elements are very much mixed and they're very much, you could say, toxic. What happened, folks? So here's our classic 5-element mandala we're also familiar with. It's a very external system describing the world. It describes our internal body, our biology. It's an elemental system, a psychological system, and it is a chakra system. So now the chakras themselves, and by the way, it's chakra, not chakra, as you might say in California or most people, places in the West, and the Sanskrit scholars had to correct me. Chakra, it's a Chak Norris, or Korlo in Tibetan, which means a wheel. Centered in circumference. So the interesting thing is in the older text, in the original text, the mandala are these wheels, and the contents are actually the chakra. Now we've come to call chakra the whole darn thing, but there's really a mandala with the deities in it, which are the chakra. What do? As we said, biologically, they're still part of our normal biology. They're not spiritual centers of the body. They are part of our intelligent regulatory control system. That's the centers through which we distribute bioenergetic energies, frequencies, and so on and so forth. Of course, we can use them for healing, and we can repurpose them for spiritual development and complete transformation into a light body. That's not a given. Obviously, it takes a lifetime, not a weekend course, and the right information. Now, the appearance of the chakras is kind of a problem, because yes, we see symbols, colors, letters, and so on, which are used, the proper ones, to invoke those pure elements or those pure forces. And they're used in the generation stage, when we have a deity in our different chakras, or many of them, or letters, syllables, and in the completion stage, like in Tumo, where we're using those chakras to bounce through our system. But they are not, as I use this quote of Tilopa, they're in reality, of course, they're made of energetic substance, light, and so on. So in fact, as Tilopa said, they're made of lunar and solar substance. They are iridescent like moon gems. So in reality, there's no flowers and there's no seed syllables, obviously. And also they are, at least in the Tibetan system, they are flat or horizontal, not little pasted things on your body. So the truth, maybe one of the first ways that chakras started to show up was as this biological stack. This is the way our body stacks up. We have heavier to the lighter going up in frequency, and you'll find this both in the Hindu or Shaivite and the Buddhist systems. And initially there were these things called padmas, adaras, or lakshas, which are basically just places to meditate in your body. But eventually they began to develop this stack. And here we have this same very, very graphic representation of the stack that we see in the Japanese tradition. And every cemetery you go to is full of these korinto, which are stacked up 5-element stupas, and then you see this depiction that's commonly available on the internet of how this stacks up in the body. And in fact, when you see the Shinto shrines, they don't have any Buddhas, they don't have any Deities on it, they just have a stacked up gold 5-elemental korinto. And here we see the biological stack as it shows up within the body, and as it shows up in the typical stupa, which as we all know is a biological stack. And there are, of course, the 24 places of the Dakini that we see within various traditions. These two pictures are from a book called Vachiyogini. It's the name Hirsch, and that relates to the deity body, to the physical world, and to one's own body. And the first stirrings, though, about chakras, about the energy body, we had the Samkhya system way back in 100 BC, which had schemas of the 5 elements. The Vedic texts start talking about pranas, 5 pranas. Then Upanishads, the 5th century, 5 subtle bodies. But the oldest tantra we know that actually It starts talking about the soul, body, and Tantra as we know it, is the Nishvasa Tattva Samhita. And then the very first, this is pretty new stuff from Chris Tompkins, who's a wonderful researcher up in Berkeley, California. It was the Kalattara Tantra, where we have the first depiction and description of the chakras. That's the very first time in the 6th century, so somewhere in the 500s. I remember those days. And then much later on, the Kabjika Tantra, I mentioned that in the 11th century because that became the basis of what I call the New Age rainbow chakra system. And so there's a picture of the book, the whole thing's been translated there, the Nishvasa Tantra. And so here is a little depiction, and I'm not using the exact depictions that are on this, that are in the Tantra, because in talking to Professor Tompkins, he has not published this yet, so it's not really common knowledge, so I'm being respectful to him. But the amazing thing is that our depictions are almost exactly as they are today. The way they are showing the chakras and the way they describe them, the colors are very, very similar, almost identical. Of course, in the Hindu system, the triangle is always upside down like this. Buddhists were used to having it the other way around. But the other extraordinary thing is, no, we do not have Ham Yam or Ram Vam Lam that we're all used to. They actually are inserting the Sanskrit vowels in each of them. I'm not going to pronounce that for you because you might use them and get enlightened. So here we have some various chakra variations. This is from the Kalattara Tantra, the very first depiction. And yes, we have the biological stack, but look, it starts in the chest and goes up to the top of the head. The Trika, which is the basis of Kashmiri Shaivism, which is still the most popular and well-known form of Shaivite Tantra, we start in the lower. It's very similar to what we used to, but we have a crown chakra instead of a brown chakra, and also the air chakra is not in the throat, but now it's up in the palate, which is in a number of Shaivite systems. And then later on in the 14th century, just to show these variations, they have a gold-red, gold-red, gold-red system in the well-known Shiva Samhita Tantra. And then here's some nice depictions, which we can just breeze through and find those around. And one of the things you do with chakras, traditionally, is you insert deities. So it can get pretty complicated depending on what you're putting in there. And here's another thing we do with the chakras. We insert the letters. And this is typical from the Trika system, or Kashmiri Shaivism, that we have the various vowels and consonants of the Sanskrit alphabet that are recited in each chakra. Or if you had a 6 chakra system, then you have to rearrange those letters a little more. But by the way, the 5 chakra system is much more common and widespread throughout the past. So when I say false, what do I mean by false? And here we go, the New Age chakra system, the rainbow system. I'm saying false, and of course there's no end of books, tens of thousands of books, courses, blog posts, repeating this material endlessly. And as I call it, the most successful, longest-running self-help wellness New Age concept and practice of all time. So congratulations. But it is not a chakra system. They are using certain placements, but they're stripped of what? There's no tantric philosophy, either Buddhist or Hindu, view, action, fruition. There's no internal deities and kingdoms. There are no mantras to speak of, etc. There's no Buddhist and Hindu ethics. In other words, there's no, I can't remember the word now, Mahayana, etc. So what it really is a hierarchical psychological system based on Jung and a fixed template for energy healing. So it might be useful for energy healing, but as a chakra system, it isn't. And also the basis. You know, in Buddhism, Hinduism, we like to think that our material comes from wisdom mind, comes from higher sources, higher energies, enlightened sources. But in this case, we're talking about clairvoyance, channeling, improvising, inventing, very clever people, pop psychology, and so on, and putting it all together. So the question is it accurate or is it an artifice? So if you want to really ask that question, investigate that question, I read this book backwards and forwards. It's a wonderful book that goes through every darn step, and literally the hundreds of people who were involved in putting this together. And really the conception of it was way back in 1918. It's only 104 years old. And it was birthed in 1977. That's when the final form that everybody's still talking about, with all of its correct colors and so on, came to be. So you should get Kurt Leland's book. It's really a lot of fun reading, though in a way he drank the Kool-Aid and he thinks there's some validity here. I honestly don't. And here's some of the characters involved, the cast of characters involved in creating a system, from Edward Casey, Rudolf Steiner, Leadbeater, and so on, and Maslow and Jung, and Esselman, I got an encounter group there. Joseph Campbell promoted this, so again, you can do some research, and it's a lot of fun learning about this, and quite shocking in many ways. And this is one of the contributors that I have to mention, because he in many ways started it all. This was a translation, the Serpent Battle, 1918, that influenced everybody to this day. It is still being repeated endlessly, even though what he took was that Kujika Tantra we talked about. It was not the original Tantra, because he didn't have access to that at that time, in 1918, but it was not even a commentary, it was just some Pandita who wrote a little bit about a chapter. So it was badly translated, there's many mistakes within it, such as the fact that sleeping Kundalini that everybody talks about, the actual word means vibrant. And things like the buzzing of the bees within the pelvis is actually talking about the Kundalini in the head. There's a Kundalini in the head and a Kundalini in the pelvis. And the Kujika Tantra was very, very popular for about 500 years and then faded away. But this translation influenced a lot of people. So that's something also to investigate. So here is actually the Kujika Tantra that we talked about from the 11th century that created that Serpent Power book. And here's what's fascinating. Yes, it does have the familiar 6 chakra system, though now it became 7, that's another change, with the names that we're familiar with too, but it also has a complete 5-element system. In fact, there is a book written about, a very scholarly book, but very readable, and you can read all about the 5 chakra system in the Kujika Mata Tantra. Isn't that amazing? Though it's the 6th chakra system that became well known. Now, the other person who contributed mightily to this whole situation is Jung on his lectures on Kundalini. Yes, it was published in 1932, but it was a mimeograph copy, etc., whatever they had in those days. And it was only 1966 when it was reprinted, it became very widespread and well known. And this is the basis of all the chakra psychology you'll see today. What's wrong with that? Well, he didn't really know much about the elements. He was very much into the Oriental techniques and technology, but it was his own psychology. He invented it, it had nothing to do with tradition. And also, he was very, very adamant that this was not for Westerners. Westerners cannot practice any Eastern methods. You should forget it. We need a Christian method because this will drive you crazy. It's just a way for me to riff and have a way of organizing my system. And the worst part of it for me is it's a hierarchical system. In other words, the low chakras are bad, and the upper chakras are where you want to be. Well, that's nonsense in terms of Tantra. The 5 elements need to be balanced and appreciated for what they are. They're 5 wisdom, not lower wisdom and upper wisdom. So, big mistake there. So what kind of changes took place in that system? Hierarchical structure, as we mentioned. They changed the number, the location, the orientation of the chakras. They added the spleen chakra, different people over the centuries. The nervous system correlations, the glandular correlations, and of course the rainbow color. None of which have any basis traditionally, or they don't have any basis for it in anatomy, physiology, or fact. And by the way, we only have 7 colors of the rainbow because of Sir Isaac Newton in, when was it? 1675. They had always been thought, it had always been 5 colors of the rainbow, but Sir Isaac Newton added 2 more because of his spiritual orientation. He thought we should have the magic number 7. So, and in fact, there's an infinite number of colors in the rainbow, not 5 or 7. Meditative changes, of course, we added Jung and Maslow's hierarchy, added various ways that you work with the chakras that are blocked, open, and so on. We have Maslow's triangle here, which is also the basis of that because he was at Esalen, and that's where the chakra system was finally incubated and he was born. So we have some pictures here of these strange configurations. Leadbeater, who was a clairvoyant and pedophile who developed this system, it's just a fact. Here's where they're adding the glands and nervous system and strange looking things that they should be horizontal, not vertical anyway. And here you can go on to YouTube and you can find Johnny Carson and Shirley MacLaine where she puts these colored chakras on them, and it's quite a hoot. So here we go, the New Age. Now, the secret, we're almost finished. I'm skipping by the whole development and migration of Tantra from India to Tibet. But we have different systems, Chakra Samvara, Chakra Viguya Samaja, and Hevaja. We have different chakra systems, different seed syllables, and so on. But and we even have a Cha system, which is both in, we have a 6-realm system, which is in Cha, but also found elsewhere. And it all comes down to the Vajrayana stack, right? So we talked about a biological stack. So why, somehow now, we have Om Ahum Soha, now we've completely mixed up that stack. Why would we put water at the top and then fire and so on, so everything's moved around? Why is that? You can ask any Rinpoche, any Tulku that you like, no one will tell you why the stack is not. The Shivites never did this. They've still got a biological stack. There's the spiritual stack, as I call it. And here it is, an example of the various traditional colors. And again, we have that stack. Well, one of the explanations I'll give you, there's 2 possible explanations. I'll give you one explanation. Is, and this came about because I realized one day that the elements have sub-elements. That's amazing. I thought it was a great discovery, and then I found out, oh, the Hindus had done that back about 1,500 years previously with the Tattva system. And so this is based on putting those together so you have elements and sub-elements. And the final word to say is that if you want to understand what that means, those elements and sub-elements, you'll have to wait for my book on chakras, my book on energy healing, elemental psychology, because that's where you get that meaning. And there's one other explanation, again, that I can't give you today, but based on physics. There's a whole physics explanation of why we rearrange the chakras to create an extraordinary opportunity for creating a light body. Thank you very much.